Welcome back to Swift Tale, where we bring you real, powerful, and eye-opening stories that remind us why justice, humility, and humanity matter more than ever. And if this is your first time visiting the channel, let me ask you a quick question. Have you ever witnessed someone being mistreated simply because others assumed they were nobody? If so, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because today's story exposes exactly how dangerous those assumptions can be. Today, we dive into the shocking moment when police officers dragged a black woman outside a courthouse, completely unaware that the woman they were humiliating was actually their newly appointed police chief. This story isn't just dramatic, it's deeply important. It challenges how authority is used, how bias can cloud judgment, and how quickly respect can vanish when people believe they hold power over someone else. Throughout this video, we'll explore exactly what led to that moment, what the officers didn't know, and how their actions changed the entire department forever. So settle in, because this is one story you won't forget. Early that morning, Chief Lana Jefferson stepped out of her unmarked SUV wearing simple clothes, dark jeans, a soft gray shirt, and a blazer that revealed nothing about her authority. She didn't want to be recognized. She didn't want salutes, handshakes, or forced politeness. What she wanted was truth, an unfiltered look at how her officers behaved when they believed no one important was watching. As the city's newly appointed police chief, Lana had heard unsettling whispers about the courthouse division, complaints of aggression, disrespect toward civilians, and officers who acted with unchecked confidence. Today was her chance to see it all for herself. With calm steps, she walked through the courthouse doors and blended effortlessly among the morning crowd. She moved with quiet observation, noting the tension in certain interactions, the impatience on some officers' faces, and the way a few approached the public as if everyone were an inconvenience. She watched how people were spoken to, how they were searched, how they were dismissed. Her presence was invisible to them, and in that invisibility, she learned more in 10 minutes than most reports had ever revealed. She paused at the hallway leading toward the staff-only section, not to trespass, but simply to observe how officers handled someone who didn't fit their expectations. She didn't announce herself, didn't flash her badge. She simply stood there, watching, listening, and waiting to see whether her instincts about this courthouse were right. She had no idea that the moment she lingered there would set off a chain of events that would expose everything she came to investigate. As Lana stood quietly near the restricted corridor, she noticed two officers at the far end exchanging glances, Officer Maddox and Officer Turner, both known within the department for their overly aggressive style. They weren't aware of who she was, but they were quick to make assumptions based on the simplest thing. She didn't look like someone who belonged there. The courthouse was bustling, yet the officers seemed fixated on her the way predators lock onto a target. Maddox nudged Turner and whispered something under his breath, both of them smirking as if they had discovered a problem waiting to happen. Lana remained still, her expression neutral, simply observing as they approached her with the slow confidence of men who believed their authority could not be questioned. They didn't greet her. They didn't offer help. Instead, they opened with suspicion, asking where she was going, why she was standing there, and whether she had any business in that part of the building. The tone wasn't professional, it was accusatory, filled with an unspoken assumption that she was out of place. Lana answered calmly, maintaining her composure, but her measured responses only seemed to irritate them further. They didn't check her ID when she offered it. They didn't verify anything. They simply made a decision based on what they saw and what they thought they knew. For the first time that morning, Lana felt a shift in the atmosphere, a tightening, a growing tension. She realized she was no longer just observing the courthouse. She was becoming the test she came to conduct, and the officers were about to reveal far more than they intended. The moment Officer Maddox decided she wasn't cooperating, everything changed. It didn't matter that Lana had answered every question calmly. It didn't matter that she had offered her ID, or that she posed no threat, or that she was simply standing in a public hallway. What mattered to the officers was that she didn't fit their expectations, and that was enough for them to escalate. Maddox stepped closer, invading her personal space, while Turner positioned himself behind her as if preparing for confrontation. Their voices grew sharper, louder, dripping with impatience. They accused her of loitering. They suggested she was attempting to enter a restricted area, something she had never done. And when she gently reminded them that she had every right to stand in the hallway, Maddox interpreted her calmness as defiance. Without warning, he grabbed her arm. Turner followed instantly, gripping the other side as though restraining a threat. Lana tried to keep her composure, reminding herself that revealing her identity too early would compromise her mission. But when she insisted they release her and check her ID properly, Maddox's face hardened with irritation. He didn't want facts. He wanted obedience, and because she didn't give him the reaction he expected, he made the impulsive decision that would change all of their lives. "Let's take this outside," he muttered to Turner. With that, the two men forcibly pulled her down the hallway, ignoring her requests, ignoring the startled looks from civilians, ignoring the basic protocol they were sworn to follow. They didn't ask for backup. They didn't call a supervisor. They didn't verify anything. Their minds were made up, and their pride was steering the situation. As Lana stumbled forward, her wrists aching under their grip, she realized she was witnessing something deeper than misconduct. She was witnessing a culture, one built on assumptions, unchecked authority, and the dangerous belief that they would never be held accountable. What they didn't know was that accountability was walking with them every step of the way. As the officers yanked Lana toward the courthouse exit, the situation shifted from troubling to outrageous. The heavy doors swung open, and suddenly she was exposed to the public, lawyers rushing between hearings, families waiting on the steps, and bystanders who froze at the sight of two uniformed officers dragging a woman who wasn't resisting, wasn't fighting, wasn't doing anything but trying to keep her balance. Conversations halted. Eyes widened. People pulled out their phones, sensing something wasn't right. Still, Maddox and Turner didn't slow down. If anything, the presence of witnesses seemed to inflame them, as though they needed to assert their authority even more boldly. Lana felt the roughness of their hands as they pulled her down the steps, her heel catching on the concrete as she tried to keep from falling. She asked them firmly but still controlled to stop and check her identification, but they talked over her, brushing off her words as if she were invisible. Maddox snapped that she was interfering with official operations, twisting the narrative to justify his behavior. Turner muttered something about people thinking they can go wherever they want. Their arrogance was astonishing, but for Lana, the moment carried a heavy and painful irony. The officers dragging her across the courthouse entrance, the place meant to protect justice, were violating every principle she had sworn to uphold. Around them, murmurs grew. A woman whispered, "She didn't do anything." A man shook his head, saying, "This is why people don't trust the system." Phones continued recording, capturing every second of the officers' misconduct. Lana didn't lash out. She didn't shout, but inside her something shifted. She had come to observe quietly, to understand the depth of the problem within her department. But now the problem was on full display for the public, for the cameras, and soon for the entire city. The officers still had no idea who they were manhandling, and with every step they dragged her further, they dug themselves deeper into consequences they couldn't even imagine. Just as Maddox and Turner pulled Lana toward the base of the courthouse steps, a sharp and commanding voice cut through the noise. "Hey, what are you doing? She hasn't done anything." A middle-aged attorney, Ms. Carver, rushed forward, her briefcase swinging at her side. She had watched the entire interaction from the doorway and couldn't stay silent any longer. The officers turned toward her with the same dismissive arrogance they'd shown Lana, waving her off as if she were a nuisance. But Ms. Carver wasn't backing down. She planted herself between the officers and the growing crowd, demanding to know what Lana had done to justify such force. Maddox's jaw tightened. Turner rolled his eyes. They repeated the same vague accusations, interfering, loitering, refusing orders, none of which matched what anyone had witnessed. Lana, still held by the arms, spoke calmly again, telling them to check her ID, insisting they were making a serious mistake. But the officers refused to listen, their pride now fully tangled with their actions. The attorney raised her voice, telling them she knew the courthouse guidelines and that nothing Lana had done violated any rule. The crowd murmured in agreement. A few people even stepped closer, emboldened by her courage. The officers stiffened, realizing the situation was no longer quiet or contained. Their control of the narrative was slipping, but instead of reassessing, they doubled down. Maddox barked at the attorney to stay out of police business, while Turner threatened to arrest anyone interfering. It was a desperate attempt to maintain dominance, and it only made the crowd more agitated. Lana could feel the weight of the moment. She had hoped her visit would simply reveal the truth about her department's culture, but now the truth was unfolding in front of dozens of witnesses. And the more the officers resisted accountability, the more obvious it became that the problem ran deep. With every second, more phones recorded, more eyes watched, and the attorney, refusing to be intimidated, stood her ground, knowing something was terribly wrong. She could sense there was more to this woman than the officers realized, and soon everyone would know exactly who they had dragged out of the courthouse. The tension on the courthouse steps reached a boiling point when a supervising officer, Lieutenant Harris, stepped outside after hearing the commotion. At first, he didn't grasp what was happening. He simply saw two officers restraining a woman while a crowd gathered, filming every second. But as he drew closer, he noticed something the others had missed. Lana's blazer had pulled back slightly during the struggle, revealing the corner of a badge clipped inside, a badge unlike any at the courthouse. Harris froze, his eyes narrowing in disbelief as the realization hit him. He stepped closer, squinting to be sure, and when he saw her name engraved on the ID, the blood drained from his face. "Officers, release her now." His voice was low, trembling. Maddox scoffed, thinking his superior was overreacting, but Harris snapped again, louder this time. "Release her immediately." Turner hesitated, confused, but Maddox refused, claiming they were handling a situation. Harris didn't waste another second. He pried Maddox's hand from Lana's arm with a force that stunned the crowd. Then he stepped back, practically stumbling as he addressed her with trembling respect. "Chief Jefferson, I didn't know you were coming." The words struck the crowd like a shockwave. Conversations halted. Cameras zoomed in. Maddox and Turner's confident expressions collapsed into horror, their faces draining of color as they stared at the woman they had dragged, shoved, dismissed, and humiliated. Lana's silence in that moment was more powerful than any outburst. She simply stood there, straightening her blazer, reclaiming her dignity, not with force, not with anger, but with a calm authority that made every witness realize exactly who had been wronged. Harris lowered his head, apologizing rapidly, while Maddox tried to stammer out excuses about protocol and misunderstandings. But it was too late. The truth was exposed, not just to the officers, not just to the courthouse, but to every single person recording. Lana looked each officer in the eyes, and without raising her voice, she delivered the sentence that shook them more than any punishment. "We'll discuss this inside." It was the moment the entire department shifted, and the moment Maddox and Turner realized their careers might have just ended at the hands of their own arrogance. The courthouse doors closed behind them with a heavy, echoing thud, sealing Maddox and Turner into a silence harsher than anything the crowd outside could have delivered. Inside, the air was tense. Every step, every breath, every glance from other officers carried a weight of disbelief and shame. Lieutenant Harris escorted Lana into a private conference room, but she didn't sit right away. She stood at the head of the table, waiting until Maddox and Turner were brought in. They entered slowly, shoulders hunched, completely stripped of the swagger they displayed minutes earlier. Lana didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm, steady presence filled the room like a judge delivering a verdict. She began by recounting, step by step, what she had observed even before the confrontation. The dismissive attitudes, the unprofessional behavior, the lack of respect for civilians, and finally, the force they used on her despite her clear attempts to cooperate. Her words were deliberate, precise, cutting through their excuses before they could even form them. Maddox tried to interrupt, claiming he felt threatened, but Lana simply turned to him with a look that made him shrink back into his seat. Turner attempted to blame confusion or miscommunication, but Harris quickly reminded him that Lana had offered identification multiple times. The truth was undeniable. Lana then shifted the conversation from their actions to the larger issue, the culture that allowed such behavior to flourish. She spoke about the responsibility officers carry, how authority should never be used as a weapon, and how dangerous it becomes when those in uniform act without restraint or reflection. The room grew heavier with every word, the weight of accountability pressing down. Maddox and Turner finally realized the gravity of what they had done, not just dragging a woman who had done nothing wrong, but dragging their own chief in front of an entire crowd. Lana ended not with anger, but with a cold, professional statement that struck harder than any reprimand. "I wasn't here today to test anyone. I came to understand what this department had become, and now I understand perfectly." The officers lowered their heads, fully aware that consequences were no longer a possibility, they were a guarantee. By the time Lana stepped out of the conference room, the story had already left the courthouse and begun sweeping across the city. Dozens of bystanders had posted videos online, and within minutes, clips of the officers dragging her were circulating across social media. Headlines popped up everywhere. Woman dragged by officers was actually their new chief. News vans gathered outside the courthouse. Community leaders demanded statements. Even the mayor's office called, stunned by the unfolding scandal. Lana addressed the public with a calm professionalism that contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding the situation. She confirmed that she had been mistreated, but she refused to let the narrative become about revenge. Instead, she emphasized the importance of accountability, transparency, and reform, principles she believed the department desperately needed. Behind the scenes, however, the consequences were swift and unavoidable. Maddox and Turner were placed on immediate leave pending investigation, and an internal review was launched to examine the courthouse division's culture. Officers who had long felt unheard finally stepped forward, revealing stories of similar misconduct that had gone unchecked for far too long. Lana's experience became the catalyst for a sweeping overhaul, new training programs, stricter oversight, and mandatory body cam reviews. The courthouse staff received new leadership, and several supervisors were reassigned. The message was unmistakable. Change wasn't coming someday, it had begun now. The community's reaction was powerful. Many were outraged at the officers' behavior, but deeply impressed by Lana's composure and integrity. For the first time in years, people felt hopeful about real reform. And though Lana hadn't planned for her first days as chief to unfold in such dramatic fashion, she understood the importance of what had happened. The department had been exposed, the truth had come to light, and now, finally, there was a chance to rebuild something better. The incident, painful as it was, had become the turning point she needed, a moment that forced the entire city to confront the difference between authority and justice. In the days that followed, Chief Lana Jefferson became a symbol, not just of authority, but of resilience, humility, and leadership rooted in accountability. Her experience outside the courthouse echoed across the city, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about bias, misconduct, and the dangers of unchecked power. But instead of allowing the incident to deepen division, Lana used it to spark transformation. Under her guidance, the department began moving toward a culture of respect, responsibility, and community-centered service. Officers were reminded that their badges were not shields from consequences, but symbols of duty, duty to protect, to listen, and to treat every person with dignity. And while Maddox and Turner faced the results of their actions, the larger lesson was clear. Change doesn't begin with punishment alone. It begins when people in power are willing to acknowledge the broken pieces and commit to rebuilding them. As Lana looked out over her department weeks later, she knew the road ahead would be long, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her unplanned, painful experience had not weakened her authority, it had sharpened it, revealing exactly what needed to be fixed. And in that, she found strength. Thank you for watching this powerful story on Swift Tale. If this is your first time here, or if you haven't already, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to drop a comment telling us what you think about this incident and the changes it sparked. Your engagement helps bring these important stories to light, and together, we can continue exploring the moments that reveal who we are and who we can become. Until next time, stay aware, stay inspired, and stay strong.